Welcome to Bios and Bookmarks, Season 7, Episode 2. I'm Shivani Ramlochan, producer of Bios and Bookmarks, which is our live interview series that we've been running during the pandemic since April 2020 in an attempt to bring you closer to the Caribbean writers at home, in the region, and the diaspora whom you know and love, celebrating their new books. We're deeply honored to have Winsome Monica Minott as today's special guest. Winsome's book, Zion Roses, published by Peepal Tree Press, has been longlisted for the OCM Bocas Prize for Caribbean Literature, and she'll be in conversation with our guest host, Jamaican bookstagrammer Akilah White. For those of you new to the Season 7 of Bios and Bookmarks is subtitled A Change is Gonna Come. We named it that after the 1964 anthemic song by Sam Cooke. And as you may have guessed, we're devoted to social change here at the NGC Bocas Lit Fest. This season, we're asking the question, what can our Caribbean writers do in our literature to help make and shape the kind of world, and yes, specifically the kind of Caribbean that we hope to see, live in, and be better people in for ourselves and for others? We think that all 6 of these writers and their books speak to that call in necessary and urgent ways. If you stay tuned, I am certain you're going to love this riveting conversation, which will feature readings by Monica and a conversation between Akilah and Monica. Also, stay tuned for more information about Friends of Bocas Lit Fest and, of course, save the dates for our upcoming festival. You'll see all of that in the conversation. Thank you for joining and enjoy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Akilah White, and I'm here to introduce today's guest, Monica Minott. Monica Minott is a poet and a chartered accountant. Her poems have appeared in The Caribbean Writer, Small Axe Caribbean Journal, the Essex Salon, Cultural Voice magazine, and more, as well as in the Jubilation and Coming Up Hot anthologies. Her awards include winning first place in the inaugural Small Axe Poetry Competition, 2 awards from the Jamaica National Books Development Council, and her most recent collection, Zion Roses from Peepal Tree Press, that we're here to talk about, has been longlisted for the OCM Bocas Prize for Caribbean Literature. Welcome to Bios and Bookmarks, Monica.
Thank you, Akilah. Thanks for the introduction.
You're welcome. So I invite you to do your first reading.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to go straight into it. And the first poem, titled Undocumented. Men, women, and children were game. The exact number of Congolese hands severed, undocumented. Leopold II sparked the trade, rubbery hands in need of civilization, cuffed, cut off, unmapped jungle hands, strung up overhead, crackling like fire, smoke free from dark bodies, unmarked yet free in the dark continent. Missionary Shepherd counted 81 free hands at one sitting. Those who came up short on delivery received this kingly gift. Hands separated from wrists, Leo's greatest life skill. Who dared argue death's offering in the Congo Free State? Brown pigmented chocolates, epigenetic scars, flashbacks now cut off my breath, triggering the new forgetting. The second poem is titled Trombone Blues. Dance perspective. It would not be unthinkable. The jazz, the sirens in his soul, like bag-o-wire blues driving sailors to shipwreck, to forget the music of home. Imagination stirred him bare on the edge of Torrington Bridge. He blew his matchless horn hard. No one cared as he looked over it on intractable death and said to himself, a lover can bear only so much sadness. Pienso wailed once more. Walking home, he chose death. Margarita speaks. The first day she heard Cyrene's wail, Margarita asked, did he undress me one last time without my knowing? He wanting to possess me, keep me from dancing rumba, but rumba is who I am. He settled on plan B. What death proposes? A short absence, skin losing color, heat disappearing under thin flowers of misunderstandings, toppling rumba. All I want is love, but love is hard to remember. I settle for unspeakable sadness, wanting to lock horns, yet skip strangulation. I feel his touch again. The nightmare renders me speechless. Last air leaving my body makes him dumb. 3. A brush with death. She was a thought, a shape, a body, an everythingness, now a truth like death. Margarita, please, he cried as his city grew cold. His lover put on a new face and he walked steadfast with his loss to a police post, crying out, Margarita gone. The next poem is titled When to Leave the Shallows. By faith I rise from the bed of shallows. I have fished all night and caught 5 parrotfish, which I ought to toss back to clean the reefs. And here he comes again in the startling morning light with no apology, telling me to toss my net once more into the deep. His horizon smile, his encompassing ageless arms beckoned, and I am stunned by my own reflection. A new gleam like magic portraits my features. I step out, leaving the desolation I have made for myself. Shambles of last evening's starless night silence any protest left in me. I gaze steadfastly at the light on the sea. I see visions wider than all the nets cast as I set out to walk on water. The next poem is titled Me, Mahogany Tree, Now Tour Guide. He stood 6 feet tall, strong, wide shoulders, skin cool to the touch, black as charcoal, chiseled cheekbones, Coromante legs. He lifted his hands to the hills, pointing to cockpit country. As far as you can see is part of a plantation named Good Hope. The plantation is history and sepulchre holding bones and rattling chains of slavery. Who better to be a tourist guide? Thousands of lives sacrificed at the altar of sugar than the great grandson of a slave. Tall, wide shoulders, Cotabanti legs, hills, cockpit country, good hope, plantation, history in ruins, bones rattling, altar of slaves, crows circling miles of banana plants laden with fruit. He smiled as he mentioned the Good Hope Great House. Look at the garage, former slave quarters, crowning gift of land. His gaze leveled green, planting suckers. Great grandmother was land, yet not land. Colonel and friends guilty of rape, yet not rape. The plantation guilty, not guilty of arduous service. Colonel, officer, and fiend, maker of history. After each rape, a woman went out, picked limes, sopped and washed herself with lime juice. No time for artifacts, bracelets, ankle cuffs. The guide paused. A mahogany tree, scarred trunk, bloodied backs, generational markers, history, and sepulchre. Turning his back to his guests, the guide removed his shirt. Imagine, he said, imagine a mahogany tree complicit in the sins of the man people call Massa. After each beating, the pain traveling down into the roots became tight knots. The tree longing for rainwater to seep in, to carry life nutrients, to kill the festering growth. Often, the tree told stories to wild birds, seeking refuge in its branches. Refugees. They understood the life of roaming, wild birds carrying today's news. People afraid walk through plantation at night. They swear they hear jumbie rumblings, although the grave quieten him some, but not enough for the likes of Rima Pam and all them gals mama him did like we touch. The guide senses movement among visitors as they huddle close, sisters hugging sisters, black men holding their women tight, real tight, white tourists' poker faces wet as we turn to exit Good Hope. And the next poem in this section, Penny Kill Shilling. The man not dead, but slave master bury him. No matter how him holler, Massa, me not dead yet. Massa answer, carry him go long. What do we call that? Some call it profit. Some call it wickedness. I am the last in the line of the man Massa bury. My great grandmother run up the hill same day with Papa in her belly. Papa was a wild one, kill plenty bakra. Every time him kill one, him say, Massa, me no dead yet. Now we sing old song and tell old stories. We remember white man named Dunbar who acts as spy for the Maroons. Take him, make warning. All who come for science, never double spy. Maroon, take action. Penny, kill shilling. I think we could stop there for now.
Okay, thank you so much for that reading. It's bringing back so much of what I was feeling when I first read the collection. So my first question is about the prominent themes of life and death that I sensed through my first reading, the cycles of life and death, particular cycles, how they flow into each other and how they coexist, especially captured in lines that we'll hear later, like expelled from the womb into death and scythe or sickle ready, because those are two items, scythe and the sickle, that is associated with life and labor and harvest, but also death, and also are used as weapons. So I wanted to ask you about how did you approach your collection when you were writing it? Did you have these themes in your mind and you intentionally chose to incorporate them into your poems? Or was it something that became apparent, after the fact when you were putting the collection together? And just to explore like the particular kinds of violence, especially that you have written about.
Okay, thanks for the question. I would like to say that I definitely did not set out to write within a theme at all.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that, as I've said often, is that I like to recover lost voices, lost in the sense that we have not heard them, we have not heard from them, and these voices are begging us to say something. So I try to listen to these lost voices. And I would say it comes from my exploration of cultural heritage. Because when you go back into history, I like to think I am both one of what Kamau Brathwaite said. He wants to feel the pain. He wants to suck the salt. He wants to be a part of what happened. He wants that sense. And at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, I would like to be like Walcott, who is also innovative. So my thing is in trying to recover these lost voices, what they have to say, what they endured, as 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 you read, because that is it. I read a lot, and when I read into the books of history, of our history, even though a lot of these histories have been written by persons who have misled us in some instances, I would say you can see the great atrocities that our ancestors suffered. And it begs not just revelation, but it begs me to question why this happened. Why is it this violence continues to happen in our societies? Because I believe the violence that we're experiencing now, Akilah, you're in Jamaica. Today
Mm-hmm.
I heard that a 13-year-old boy was stabbed that goes to Papine High School for a phone again. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, this is just one example. If you look in the United States, our black men are killed daily. Where is this violence coming from? And I
Mm-hmm.
believe a part of what is happening is the inheritance that it's a cultural inheritance. It's part of our DNA. Now, epigenetic scars are carrying these markers forward because of the atrocities that were visited on black bodies during slavery. And I'm not a scientist, but
Mm-hmm.
based on scientific studies that I've read, initially it was 1 or 5 or 6 studies confirmed that there are epigenetic markers that trauma travels in our DNA, and that is serious, and we need to take stock of that. So when we hear of these things happening in our societies, we cannot just shrug them off and say people just wicked and bad. That nothing like that. I think there are some deep seated problems that we need to unearth. We need to put on the table. We need to say, why are these things happening? In the vein of the Socratic legacy, that we're questioning rather than accepting. We're
Mm-hmm.
questioning. And in that way, we hope that by unearthing some of the problems that we went through, then it is that it will give us this room to have discussions like we are doing now, Akilah, and
Yeah.
and and have discussions in the way that says, how can we heal? How can we mend the fences? Not just to show that these bad things happen. We all, I think, have some understanding, but I don't think many people venture deep into it. But when you
Agreed.
venture deep into it, I feel scarred again. And and I think this is what happens. I immerse myself, and out of this immersion, I I'm hearing from the past, and I'm hearing of what happened, and I just have to write. And so in answering your question, I don't set out to do it, but my
Yeah.
readings in a sense sort of begged me, pushed me in a sense to, you cannot be silent. We cannot be silent, Akila. And on the other side of it, I think that Cornel West has a term, the prophetic legacy of Jerusalem, where it
Mm.
is life and life everlasting. I'm a believer, and I believe that everlasting life is available to everyone. And if everlasting life is secure, then we must have a hope. And my hope is that there will be this day, there will be this everlasting life, and not just everlasting life after we're gone. I believe also that there is life in language. I believe language is life. When I speak to you, when I speak to other poets or other writers, I feel the energy of life. They give me life, and this life is what I think I try to translate into words, because language, I believe, is life. When you
Mm,
put words together, when you put words together, the same words, if you shift them around, can mean many different things. So I believe that in language there is life. And therefore, when I have to write about atrocities, you'll see in some of my poems like All Loss is Gain. All loss is gain. What a thing to say. But if you can appreciate where I'm coming from, after you go through these atrocities and you still have to live, you still have to have your belief system, you still have to overcome. So this is where my life, this is how my life comes into my poetry. It is through the legacy of Jerusalem. So I
yeah.
hope that answered your question.
Oh, quite thoroughly. And actually, in listening to you, it reminded me of a line from your first collection, Kumina Queen, also out from Peepal Tree Press, from the poem Dockside, where you wrote, "We dissect sentences to identify hope." And there was
Yes,
this image of you as like construction workers working
yes.
into the language. So, like,
Yes.
I
So
totally
the
get what
two
you're
things
saying.
come back together again. So thanks
Yes.
for reminding me of that,
Yes.
because it is the hope, and as the language can bring life and hope, because that so I am hoping that my poems are going to be that hope, that when somebody reads it and say, yes, I've gone through all of this thing, but there is hope. I cannot give up. I cannot do something vile or something bad. I must lift my moral standards. I need to become more virtuous as an individual. And I think that that is what my hope is, that I've poured out into my pages. So
Yes. Yes.
that's where it comes from.
Yeah,
So it's not something I
absolutely.
set out to do. Mhm.
There's a comment from YouTube from Nadine, who said thanks to Akilah, that's me, who shared one of the poems in my IG stories on Instagram. Zion Roses is now on
Mhm.
my TBR list, which if you're
Oh,
not on
thank you.
Bookstagram, that means you're to be read list. Yes. And I actually shared an excerpt from the next poem I'm going to ask you about,
Mhm.
Me, the Mahogany Tree, now tour guide,
Yes.
which hit me in particular as a tourist baby. I was born and raised in Montego Bay. My
Okay.
mother and godparents and family friends were all in tourism. And we grew up, of course, in the shadow of the infamous Rose Hall estate. Um, but the way tourism has sort of monopolized that history, the way how plantation houses are presented in Jamaica are these spaces where really almost any sort of evidence that our enslaved ancestors existed there is not there. It's really not. You look at Rose Hall Estate and it's these rolling green hills, and it's a leisure venue. It's for parties. It's for all kinds of events that have and no one there, at least when you go on these properties, because I went on a tour there, really focus on like the enslaved people, the enslaved Africans that were there. It's really about the owners. And of
Yes.
course, we know that the archives has a lot more information on the owners. So our
Yes.
historians typically have to work against that in terms of how they read the archives to sort of find out what were the lives of those who were really most impacted by that entire system to this day. So, just in listening to you talk about how you had to hear the voices and you had to put them on the page, I wanted you to sort of explore like why you even felt to write this poem about Good Hope Estate, which is the estate mentioned in the poem, and you even hear the
Right.
name Good Hope. And when you, and when you go on the UCL database and you look at the names of these estates, it's Good Hope, it's Friendship Estate, it's all of these
Yes.
quite divine titles. And I wanted to talk about the importance of your poem and what it excavates there. Because despite me talking about tourism and how it's presented to tourists, I mean, we that live here absorb these narratives too. And we feel
True.
as if, well, we know what happened. We don't really need to know any more details. Nothing more is necessary. We're fine. That's the past. We don't really need to be
Exactly.
thinking about that anymore. We ourselves have imbibed this kind of propaganda. And for
Mhm.
myself, it wasn't until I was at a research symposium where Donna Hope was, and she said, we need to think about, as a country, how we preserve these places that are for us our Auschwitz, because
Mm.
we are, that is what they are. And we need to think about that and then compare it to what they are presently and how we talk
Yes.
about them. You go on the
Yeah.
tourist board website and it's all about the elegant Georgian architecture and the
Yes.
fabulous Jamaica mahogany furniture. And you have other government institutions that also put forth this image, because I've
Yeah.
heard it on the radio. What is History Corner that comes on the local radio? I don't know if you remember it. And they
Yes. Yes.
Yes, yes,
Mhm.
and they give those little proverbs, and then I usually enjoy it, and then they feature this estate in Saint Mary, and I have to tell you, it almost took me out of my body. I was in a vehicle, and I started to just lose my sense of place because of the way they just spoke about this estate where such violence happened as this sort of really glorious kind of property that they
Yes.
make it desirable, like they make it a desirable aspirational image. So could you just talk
Walk
about
you
that?
through.
I love
Yeah,
it.
well,
Yeah.
first of all, I want to just first start with the name, Good Hope. I was
Mhm.
reading an article about the plantation, and the name first of all struck me because I suppose my antennas are up for these cultural things. And Good Hope, I said, what a name to give a slave plantation. That was the first thing. And I said, the atrocities, the murders, the rapes, the inhumanities that took place there, nothing like Good Hope. And then, as you say, the story was one of you must visit Good Hope. It is this place, a desirable place to come. It's all, it's all touristic. It's come. We want you here. We're showing you the best of Jamaica.
Mm,
And what has happened is I liken it to the great forgetting, which I mentioned in another poem, Undocumented, because after Leopold II committed all the atrocities, killed 10 million people of the Congo in a place he called Congo Free State, he was able to cover it up because after the world, said no more to Leopold II, he came out. But after that, nothing was said.
mm,
It was as if it never happened. It
mm,
was it was a Holocaust. It has been described as such, and yet still the world continued. The world continued, and there was nothing else said. So it's situation like these when I meet them, and I said I question because I'm going back in the principle of questioning everything and
mm,
everyone. And
mm,
I mean, how can we, as Jamaicans, as descendants of people trafficked, raped, robbed, murdered on these plantations, how can we just accept it? Should we? The question is, should we? Do we need the tourist dollar that badly that we, instead of telling the truth, will that prevent tourists from coming? Because maybe the tourists would still come because they want to hear
of
the
course I
truth.
would. Of course I would.
So, because the truth frees us all, and the truth would probably help with the healing. So, we are into forgetting. And I think that's one of the things that I am working with, that I want for us not to forget the past. I want for us to understand, because until we understand, until we know our past, we will not get past it.
Mm,
Until we accept where we're coming from, the violence is going to continue. Until we can teach our youngsters this is what happened to us, but we are going to break the cycle. We are going to recognize that this was bad, this was evil, this was wrong. There was no moral underpinnings. However, we just go along. We just float with the tide. We
Mm-hmm.
do not stop and say no more. Like for instance, although this may be a little bit it's topical, but it's also controversial. Uh, Prince William and Kate is now in Jamaica.
Oh boy.
And the question is, fine, they're in Jamaica, we can welcome them, but they need to come with reparation funds.
Exactly. Or don't come
They
at
can't
all.
just come and say, we're profoundly sorry. That doesn't make any sense to me.
At all.
I think we need to understand that the fuel for the plane and the entourage that they travel with, they could not come and send it as scholarships for high school students or basic school students because they have to give back. That is a problem. We are profoundly sorry, needs to be followed by action. So we're not saying you should not come. We're saying come, but do what is right. Do what is right. We want for you to say, yes, we are responsible. Take responsibility for what happened in the past. The wealth that was built on the backs of Black men and women, we now deserve to have some of it replanted in our
Mm-hmm.
land. And that's what I would have to say. So these are the things that come out when we discuss the plantation, because
Exactly.
Britain was highly invested in plantations, both the crown and the government. So
Mm-hmm.
me asking for them to give us back a little bit of what was taken is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. So I say all of these questioning, all of these poems that I am putting out in terms of the colonial time. Some people say with some Monica, those times are gone. And I said, no, they're not gone. They're not gone if we cannot educate our children, if we cannot feed our children, if we cannot provide health care to our children. They're not gone. And until we understand this, we as a people, persons like myself and all of us here in the room, we that thank God we have a small voice, we are the ones that must say, we have to say it is not enough. Give us our due. So I don't know if you want me to say a little bit more about the poem.
Oh, it's just that I beg pardon to everyone. There are some Jamaican dogs here doing the most in the background.
That's all right.
But I'd
It's
like
part
to
of life. It's part of life, Akira. That's part of life. Don't worry about it.
yes. So I'd like to read some comments that we've been getting from YouTube and Facebook. So here's a comment from Mihaela McRae. Hope I got your name right. Monica chronicles events through the lens of lasting emotions that pin memories to the deepest, most secure parts of our hearts and minds, so that future generations will never forget the journey. That's a beautiful contribution to the discussion.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Yes, thank you so much. And another one from YouTube from Genevieve Vassal. Language is indeed life, and your books and poems will live on long after we are all gone from this life. Thank you, Winsome Monica. Wow, your
Thank you
fans are
too.
here. Yes, and they're
Thank
fabulous writers
you.
themselves. I love it.
Thank you.
So, yes, yes. Um,
Yes.
so I'll invite you at this point to do a second reading. Yeah.
Okay. And I'm just going to say a little bit before I read this section. I'm going to be reading poems inspired by the life of Jean-Michel Basquiat, a very famous painter. A genius. And the fact that he was able to do so many paintings in his brief life attests to how inspired he was. But if you look at his paintings, I like to say that I feel that Jean-Michel was my brother. He was he did not restrict himself. He decided that he's going to paint whatever it is that his passion, how his passion directed him. He decided that he was going to, well, he started as a spray painter on walls, and he crossed over to mainstream, and he still kept some of his original style, and he was saying to them that you are not going to change me. If you want to be with me, you step over the line. I'm not stepping over to your line. And he held that position. Unfortunately, he died by a drug overdose. So, in a sense, the violence of the system captured him. So, again, we're dealing with violence, we're dealing with pain, we're dealing with a genius, but he still was in a trap. And as if he knew this, he knew he was in this trap all the time, and he was fighting to get out. So, I'm going to read poems that were inspired by Basquiat, and then maybe one or two others. Let us play by my rules. I have been called, yes, called to a city where boys grow into skeletons and skulls, wearing halos of nails and thorns, where locusts deconstruct and strip down like I strip down for you, show you my lines, my angles, my crown. They cross me over, Madonna, to feel what black crazy feels like. They cross me over, sit me down, sing me soft, sing me wild, ring me with fire. Then they listen when I testify. A broken heart loud, back talking loud. Before they reply, and the second poem in this section, Scribbling, was JeanMichel Basquiat. You want to rob spray painted crowns again? You can't take my crowns. You want to understand my scribblings on dream, my post living reality? I understand the rake, you wanting what is not mine to give. Rakes. Not even I understand a dung heap. I set it on fire, smoke, Riverton dump. Drop school or school dropped me. It figures why I scribble and scribble. Expelled from the womb into death, a crowning of life, ashes to ashes. I light fires in my forest. I watch them burn bright, scythe and sickle ready. Iron cool, iron medium hot. A hole in the forest, not a metaphoric hole. A hole to dig deep, plant corn. Corn, not gunshot, not GM corn, real corn. Harvest, workers with spray guns, witnessing corn crushed at their feet, vanishing line of graffiti artists. We paint, we scribble, messengers of woe. A beautiful corpse. The art dealers lined up. Yes, he was indeed beautiful. Yet they left before we buried his body. His going had no code. Body laid out. It was time for the counting. The rains came. I got a hole in my soul, I heard Jean say. A hole so large only death can fill it. I got a hole in my pocket, I heard the answer. Just one more painting before you go. Self-portrait as a heel? A version of my story. He stepped out, heel first, breech. The first woman superimposing thoughts on me since I left. And look at where she chose to start. Me, Basquiat as a heel. A laugh. I'm laughing. Here is poetic justice. I could do worse. It could have been Basquiat as a slippery eel or Basquiat as a finger-sucking matchstick man. I examine man's transgressions, stuck at lesson one. No black heroes in Hollywood. I've been gone some 30 years, but little has changed. A mulatto trumpeter walks in. His name is Jazz. Play me, I dare him. Soon he's relegated to be me. Plays a small part in a skit, kills himself. Did someone say the recurring heel? What a nice boy. Why did he do it? He made good tackling the status quo. No guarantees for a well heeled graffiti artist. It was then it came to me, or she spoke to me, saying, make an appeal for every wronged man that went the way you did. Untimely. Do you mourn loss, or love, or loss? I don't think so. It was the pain, drugs, and wood chips falling like rain. I search now as I searched then for cover. None. A shrill sound hammering my brain. I need to get rid of rage. I heard, run. So I ran. I left room for them to mourn. Today I rock back on my heels. I feel a surge, equilibrium. I lose balance again. And my final poem of this section is titled Malavish and I. He painted me in secret, a changing abstraction. I am no more, no less than the first black square. He hid me for months, kept me close to his touch, not wanting to share an abandonment with a world not ready to receive me as he had. And he, my lover, realized while rediscovering cosmic patterns, moving geometry up a notch. Art needed no one. No, not the first black square, the second, or even a red square. Art needed no one. It never did. Thank you.
Thank you for yet another beautiful reading. Now, when I hit on these poems, those first few lines in Let Us Play by My Rules, like I got chills at that image of the boys growing to skeletons. And then when I hit the end and I saw that it was Basquiat, I was like, oh, and you sent me on a search. And I was really fascinated by my response. Why? Because, I mean, he's a famous artist of international renown. But I find sometimes with these Black artists that reach a certain pinnacle, I think about Bob Marley in the same kind of way. They kind of become caught up in particular narratives and they feel rather remote sometimes, rather removed from any kind of sense of place or being from a particular community, except in a sort of a very artificial, commodified way, you know, almost as a kind of aesthetic. And so in reading your poems, it sort of brought me back to him and his art in a real way, through your lens and how you read and interpreted his work. So I wanted you to talk about your own relationship with him and his art. In another interview, you said that, you know, with him, you felt the freest in writing. I was really fascinated by that. Yeah, just to talk about that whole suite of poems that you have there about him.
Okay. For me, I think the first time I was introduced to Basquiat was through my niece Nicola Vassell, who has a gallery in New York City. But before that, she always, we spoke about paintings, and that's her line, her job. And I was really fascinated by the work of Basquiat. I don't know what it is that initially drew me in, but once I was there, I was fully invested. And I felt that he had something to say that he had not said, that all of these millions of dollars that his paintings are being sold for now had no real value to him even then when he was alive, because he was really a subversive voice. He was actually saying, I do not agree with all of this, but I am being honored by you all. So I will take the honors, but I'm using my art as a tool of rebellion. And that is what drew me in to Basquiat. The fact that he, as a young man at such a young age, was able to look through his lens and see the world for what it was. I don't know if at 18, 20, I saw the world as vividly as he did and rejected the world. As I said, he's a complex, he's very complex human being, because although he rejected the world, he became a part of the art district at the time and all that went with it, the hype, the glory, the drugs. And in that sense, he succumbed to the ills of the world, and that is the dilemma that I want to bring out in my poem as well, because I want young persons, especially who are gifted, to realize that there can be this point of success and not fall over the deep edge like so many of our artists. So the thing is, look at myself, look at yourself, look at persons who are talented, and how can this talent be used to foster other talent, and understanding that, as one person said, you have to guard the back door. So when you enter the front door and you become successful, there's always a back door. In other words, there's always something wanting to take you out and down. So enjoy the fruits of your labor, enjoy all that you have worked for and or your genius, but at the same time always be guarding. You have to guard yourself closely, and especially so it would seem in the artistic realm, because it's easy to be subversive and then fall over a cliff. So even in my with my subversive spirit, you have always to be ready to look around you and to see what are the pitfalls. My mother called them pitfalls, because some are always willing to take you out. That's how the old people talk. There's always something or or someone willing to carry you down. You know that phrase in Jamaica. Somebody willing to carry you down. So she's always teaching us, growing up, that do not just open your heart and your hands to people too readily. He can help, give, but no, guard your heart. So that is it. So in terms of Basquiat, I have a freedom with him, though, that
Mhm.
I allow myself to when I'm immersed in his work and his life, I see things through different, I would say, I have different perspectives, because first of all, I just write what I feel and hear in line with what is on the painting. So if he's dealing with something that has the crown and he has the ladders and he has the, I'm bringing in all of those things, not necessarily specifically, but the idea of them, the crossing over. So a ladder may be that you're crossing over a chasm to go to heaven. Yeah. So it's not necessarily, verbatim. So it is that he gives me this. So I have no inhibitions at all when I'm writing about Jean-Michel Basquiat. I put it down and I leave it, I come back to it. And oftentimes I don't have to do much work. Like I have to do a lot of work on other poems. I do work on his, make sure everything, fits in and the words and the structure and this. But I find that because of this relationship I have developed with Basquiat, the voice is clear, the
Mm.
voice is clean, and I hope that I'm speaking for him some of the things he would wish to say, the questions he wants asked. Is money that important? The fact that my life is gone and my paintings are of value. What true value? What is true value? So he wants us to ask all of these questions and to answer them. Because
Mm-hmm.
in the end, if we go to the other side of the story, not death, but life and everlasting life, we have to ask ourselves, what is the true value of life? And it can definitely not be summed up in the value of material things. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that in the Basquiat poems, this is what he's asking of me to ask of you. And this is the narrative that keeps running because, of course, everybody, and I say 100 million for one painting, and everybody say, oh, he's important. Let me look at him again. But he's actually saying that is not what is important. Why you're looking at me, and it then says research, go deeper. Why am I important? Maybe it is that my mother, who dedicated so much of her life to me when I was growing up, took me to art fairs, art shows, sent me to special art training. In other words, the mother was a very important part of his life. His mother actually had a nervous breakdown and was institutionalized. But he got so much of her, so much love, and it reported in his paintings. So it is, I keep saying, what is important in the life of Jean-Michel Basquiat? And it is so much more than the paintings that he has left behind.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think what runs through your entire collection really is this pushback against the commodification and the seeing of ourselves as property, as asset. Like this is how the world tends to treat us in the framing that is given to us. And how can we actually listen to those who were here before us? And what can we learn
Yes.
from them and their work and the questions that they asked? So I
And
loved
it
that.
doesn't and it doesn't mean that we're not to strive or not to achieve.
Sure. It's
It
just
it
to think
means
about it through different paradigms. Yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah, than the typical.
yeah,
Hmm.
definitely. Because I think sometimes I would say, but if we do not fall in line with the expectation of the world in terms of what success is, then we are failures. But we are not really failures. It is for us to show the world what success is.
Exactly, exactly.
And I think
So
that's where we're moving towards. And I'm hoping that in the lines I'm putting down, some of that is gonna flow through.
yeah, well, I would say I can confirm for you, and I'm sure for others that have read it that it definitely has, and the rest have that to look forward to. So we're coming up to the end of our hour, but before you go, we have this fun segment that we always do with Bias and Bookmarks with our authors, and it's called Promptly Written. Envisage this following scenario. You step onto an elevator where the publisher and editor of your dreams are in conversation about a very specific topic. It's up to you to pitch them your dream project for that topic, be it a book, a play, a sculpture, a musical album, anything your creative heart desires. Your prompt is, you can't take my crown. Take it away, Monica. What's your pitch?
Okay, this is a bit sudden and exciting, nevertheless. But you can't take my crown for me means, first of all, I'm just setting the stage. Well, am I supposed to be just speaking to them? Am I
You,
pitching to them
yeah,
directly?
however you want to
Okay,
do it, however you imagine
okay.
it. Yeah, man.
Well, okay, I have this great idea.
Mm-hmm.
and it needs artificial intelligence to take it to the next step.
I
I
like it.
want us to, right, look at all the different uh, scenarios that crowns have been used from the 15th, 16th, 17th century to
Mm.
present day. And I want us to, first of all, create images of what the crown represented then by using this artificial intelligence, and then superimposing on it what we have just talked about, what the crown
Ooh.
should be, and
Mm.
relate the two things together and create a 30-minute documentary. And then if that goes well, then we can make it into a series. You Can't Take My Crown,
Yeah.
because
I
the
love
crown
it.
represents much, much more than a
Mm.
physical crown. And of course, it's going to show the crown that belongs to the British crown, and it will
Mm.
show the crown that belongs to the persons, the kings and the princesses and the kings and queens of Africa, and the
Mm-hmm.
crown as we now want it to be. And the crown that we want it to be now is a recognition of goodness and truth and
Mm.
sound moral values. And that crown will help us. We will probably prevent the war in the potential nuclear war that is to come, because it
Mm.
is going to be a crown that is totally of greater substance than the physical ones that they had in the 17th and 18th century.
Yeah. Wow, that's a powerful concept. I hope the right people have been watching. You never know. You could expect an email coming to you to make that a reality. Oh my
Yes,
gosh.
but it was fun being here with you, Akila.
It was
It
so
was,
much fun being here with you, Monica. I wish we could go on talking, didn't get to
yeah,
talk about half of what we wanted
half of
to.
what we
But
wanted to, because I can't believe that the time is over.
the
I
time
can't
is
believe it.
up. I can't believe it either,
Can't
but
believe
I
it.
want to thank you so much for agreeing to sit with me here for Bias and Bookmarks. I hope that the audience got a lot from it. I certainly did. And to remember that if you haven't, you can go out and get Zion Roses by Monica Minott out at your favorite retailer, wherever you are. Support independent stores. And that will be it from us. Thank you again, Monica Minott. Take care.
Well, thank you.
Yes. Bye, everyone.